By those ages using government-issued ID, for instance. I mean, should Australians be prepared for having their faces scanned to use social media?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We have a special guest, a citizen journalist, a well-respected journalist, reporting all the way live from Istanbul, Turkey, not far from the Syrian border. Just dramatize it a little bit. Chriscoveries, how are you?
Mate.
Just want to make it more dramatic. You know?
Turn it up. We can turn it up some more. And there's no connection between my arrival here in Turkey and the fall of Syria close by days later. No connection at all.
There's a saying, the lady doth protest too much, methinks.
Well, look, that's all I can say contractually.
So you actually, when we were speaking offline in the lead up to this podcast, you actually had some interesting insights in the situation in Turkey. Because for many decades, Europeans, people in Germany, in the United Kingdom and other parts of Western Europe, have felt like strangers in their homeland. A lot of people in those countries complained because they felt like they were overrun by Turkish people. But now, interestingly, the situation seems to be reversed, and the Turkish people don't feel like they're at home in Turkey. So tell our audience a little bit about that.
They absolutely do. Speaking with Turks here, they feel, certainly in the city of Istanbul, they feel like it's not their city anymore, so many of them. From Syrian refugees, Lebanese refugees, so many migrants from Africa, all this similar, not to the same scale, but a similar story where they feel a loss of their identity, of their people. And it's a story that I can absolutely share, living in a big city like Sydney, and seeing that change happen so rapidly, so quickly. And they feel like they've been sold out by someone, and they're looking for someone to blame. So I can really understand the story and tell them that it's happening in a lot of different cities to a lot of different peoples around the world, London, especially. And they felt somewhat reassured, as did I as well, that this is not a single story that's happening. The reasons why are more complex. They've got a lot more reasons, which I can go into if you want, which you may not know, but well, I like speaking with why I do Chriscoveries is I like speaking with people. So I speak with every taxi driver that I can. Can we speak about Erdogan, or can we talk about Bashar al-Assad? And as soon as we talk about Bashar al-Assad, we talk about Syria. We can't talk about Syria without every taxi driver bringing up Israel, Yehudis. And that's when the conversation turns to there. They look at the changes that are happening there. And they don't like the Gazans much more than a lot of Australians do, but they also feel a strong solidarity with the situation that's happened because they feel being displaced. Look, if you're looking for a conclusion of how everyone feels here, the malaise, the questioning of power, of direction of what's happening, and inflation. The number one topic there is the inflation that's taken away their identity, the point of money being tied to their national identity and people. Look, I've learned a lot speaking with the people here. I love speaking with people where I can, but everyone is always looking for someone to blame wherever you are. And here they've got a bit more of a laser focus than they do in Australia. It's less nebulous of globalists, and they're particularly pointing to a certain groups of people which they blame.
Sure. Now that the Syrian war is over, the Assad regime has been overthrown. Will we see less Syrian refugees in Turkey?
Nope. That's the question that I ask as well. When any of the I'm getting better at my racisms. You can tell someone who's from Syria and Turkey, and I ask people, are you from Syria or Turkey, and how do you tell? And there's the race is a funny thing, ethnicity, and it's like, oh, you look at it like this, you look at it like that, and I'm like, okay, all right, teach me your racisms, please. And I'm getting better at identifying who's from where, and they're teaching me. Very good. A lot of racism over here, quite well developed, but they're teaching me about who comes from where. And the Syrians feel like they've flooded and they don't want to go back. The economy's better. The Turks want them to go back because they're not our people. But while they share a common religion, they're like, they don't understand our ways. And Kemalists here are fiercely Islamic secularists. I'm still getting my head around that one. But they won't. The fundamental point is the Turks don't believe that the Syrians will go back. The Syrians don't want to go back because, I mean, what is there for them? Both are blaming other people, be it Iran or Israel.
Well, I mean, even though they share the same religion, it is, after all, at the end of the day, a different culture, different nationality. So Syrians are essentially Arabs. They speak Arabic. The Turks are Turkish, obviously. They speak a different language, Turkish, and they're more, I guess, European in some ways in their outlook, maybe, Asian, some Mongoloid, I guess, mixture as well, perhaps, Mongolian mixture. This Turkey has always been known for many decades for being very secular, very Western. Do you think that it's become more autocratic under Erdogan? Do you see more signs of religious Islamism on the ground there?
There is the far right party, which is quite interesting. Secular, still can't pronounce them. Sorry, secular. These are the guys but they're not the ones that, despite their apartment story, 8-story tall banners of their faces and what have you, they're not the main game in town. What everyone either loves or hates, Erdogan and his AKP. They look at Erdogan either as widely a villain or a saint. And to speak about Erdogan is a sensitive topic. I'm just realizing I've just got to tread a little bit carefully here, because I speak with taxi drivers here unwilling to speak about Erdogan for fear of ending up in a prison cell. So I'm just having a moment realizing, while I'm here, I've got to be a little bit careful speaking about it. But to speak about other people, yes, Erdogan is a topic of either great love or hate, and certainly for some, deep fear.
He's seen as a caliph. He likes to portray himself as a caliph. I think he wants to restore the glory days of the Ottoman Caliphate. Is that your impression of being over there of him? Do you get that impression at all?
I think that's too lofty to say. That that was a large union, but he's certainly. If I would say that one thing that drives him is a fear of the kind of 1920-22 when the winning powers wanted to divide Turkey into 4 different states, and that's it. That there's this fear of the West. They just want to carve us up. There's a fear of Russia, in that they're not really any much better. And from the South, Israeli-backed powers. They look at that as a local rival. Does he want to create a new caliphate? I don't think so. I don't think he's going to turn to that. Remember, Erdogan did go to jail for saying that the extremist mosques are nothing but barracks for a militant uprising, to paraphrase. He went to jail for that.
Wow.
So he is no ally of militant Islam, and in fact fears the influence of that kind of but he is looking to try and assert power in a more economic, more compared to others, more of a soft power sense, and become a regional player. And to do that, Istanbul is on its third major international airport. To do that, huge toll roads and bridges everywhere, and a currency that's lost 95% of its value in a decade. In some ways, impoverishing its people. In other ways, leading to new export markets where the lira is so cheap, they practically give it away. So they rival some countries in Central Europe for car exports. Good or bad, it is.
Interesting. Do you think Erdogan is, now that the Assad and the Iranians, his Iranian handlers and his Russian handlers have been kicked out of Syria, do you think Erdogan is trying to establish a foothold there?
Yes. You'd be silly not to. It's a land rush. Everyone's got an eye on a piece of it. From the south, Netanyahu's made his move up to the outskirts of Damascus. Turkey's already been in Syria for a long time, but you'd be mad not to try and grab more. 50 acres and a mule kind of story there. If you don't grab it, someone else will. And once those borders are set, a la post-World War II, get every mile you can before the Soviets get there. That border is set in stone for, well, last time the border was set was a long time ago. So you've got 70 years there to try and grab. Just don't push too far, or you rock the boat too far. So he'd be silly not to, and he would be kicking himself, and his following political parties will use it as political ammunition against him if he doesn't vote for me. Erdogan did not use this once in a century opportunity to get more land for our people. I will next time this comes along.
I'm trying to also scratch my head and figure out this new de facto leader of Syria. I believe his name is al-Julani. So initially they portrayed him as ISIS. I mean, he is linked to ISIS. There's no doubt about that. But what's kind of surprised me and caught a lot of people off guard is he's trying to portray himself as a moderate. He wears a suit. He speaks like a moderate, talks like a moderate. What are your thoughts about this guy?
Diverse, equitable, and inclusive. Can I use the word jihad? Sure. Yeah, I think I can. I got to be careful here with my words. I don't have the backing of CNN. Look at the Taliban. They were talking about a diverse and inclusive, an inclusive Taliban. And they talked about equality, if you remember the press leader. I believe he even used the word multicultural as well. Say the words, bend the knee, and you'll get what you want. It's all the same. I think the correct word in this case might be a shibboleth. If I could, I'm sorry if I use that incorrectly, but I think it's broadly within that kind of vein. To the leaders in Washington D.C. and others that staff them, if they hear these words, they think, "Oh, okay, that we speak the same language. We might be different, but okay, we're speaking from the same sheet of music. Good words, bad words. Good policy, bad policy. Okay, he might have an AK-47, what have you. It's a dirty world over there, but at least he's being inclusive." The reality might be very different from that, but when you interpret everything in DC through state office memos, well, looks right, flies right. Yep, give him the stamp of approval and get rid of the $10 million bounty over his head.
Interesting. Now, you were speaking about freedom of speech in Turkey and your concerns about that, including your concerns of being locked up in a cell. So obviously it's no laughing matter. Let's move over to Australia, other side of the world. Offline, we're having a discussion about this, and it is a topic that a lot of people are discussing. So the new hate vilification laws. I'm just going to play a clip. It's 3 minutes. I'm not going to play the whole 3 minutes. I might just skip through some of it, of Jacinta Allen speaking about her intentions. It's about a week old, maybe a week and a half, where she announced that there's going to be some new anti-hate vilification laws, ostensibly to protect Jewish people and other minorities. I'm just going to play it. I'll get your reaction.
Jews increasingly feel that simple promise of a modern multicultural Victoria is being denied them. How else do you describe a real and demonstrated increase in reports of anti-Semitic incidents? How else do you describe a tendency for extreme, dangerous and radical protest that is allowing anti-Semitism and hate to thrive within it? This is simply unacceptable in our modern multicultural state. It's unacceptable in our modern multicultural Victoria. And today, the Government of Victoria renews its promise to Jews and to everyone of every background. Whoever you are, whoever you pray to, you deserve to be safe and welcome here in this state. And today too, we support that promise with strong action to fight hate and help Victorians heal. Action that I will now outline. We will be setting a standard that we do not tolerate anti-Semitism. We do not tolerate anti-Semitism. Just as we do not tolerate any form of hate, racism or discrimination against a Jew, a Muslim, a Sikh, a Hindu, a Chinese Victorian, or against a woman, against a gay, lesbian or trans person. It's all despicable. All racism is wrong. All racism is evil. It's hateful. It's corrosive. And anti-Semitism is racism, and there are too many. There are too many who want to qualify anti-Semitism or make excuses for it, and I want to make it absolutely clear that I never will. We've also had enough of the protests that have caused division and disruption in our streets. Now, peaceful protests can and must be protected in this state. Protests that harm others cannot. Firstly, we will ban the flags and symbols of listed terrorist organisations in public. That includes Hamas, Hezbollah and several other groups, including white national extremists and radical racist violent extremist right-wing groups. We will also ban the use of face masks and balaclavas at protests. We know they are being used to conceal identities, shield agitators from crowd control measures like capsicum spray. Well, face masks aren't a free pass to break the law. And there should be no place to hide in this state if you're a racist, stirring up hate on the streets. And we're also going to ban the use of glue, rope, chains, locks and other dangerous attachment devices.
Anyway, your reaction, so just a bit of context, this was right after the arson attack on the Adass synagogue. Your reaction, Chriscoveries.
How does this stop fire bombings? I'm not aware.
That's an excellent.
How does this stop fire bombings? That's the problem we're getting.
That's an excellent point.
Inciting violence. Speech that incites violence, I believe, already falls under it and should be prosecuted fairly equally, whatever colour skin or what have you. I put to you the speech that should be deeply concerning is not happening. I don't believe it's happening at these protests. Funnily enough, as Erdogan went to jail for saying, it's happening inside closed doors and being streamed on YouTube, and powerless. Police seem powerless to do anything about it. Jihad is the solution. Yes, I know jihad means uprising, etc. If you listen to the rest of the speech, to me, it seemed to meet the requirement for hate speech, at least have a talk to them about it. Police didn't do anything about it. This is happening behind closed doors. This is happening well recorded, well documented, and nothing. I know it's a different state. This is, as it was said, they are being used as barracks. Now, of course, these laws won't do anything beyond just make it harder for these protests, which by and large have been, I actually say, for what I've seen, these protests have been fairly calm. I haven't seen too many violent incidents. Are they particularly pent up people? Yes, but they have a right to say this, to say what they do. Banning these flags, I'm not sure is necessarily going to work. But it depends what your aim is. Is your aim to prevent fire bombings, or is your aim to prevent speech? And do the people who are at these protests have something that's fair and justified to say? I actually think they do. I think the people at these protests have a point that they're trying to get across that is being misportrayed by media and being used as political points to control other groups which have nothing to do with whatever happened with that firebombing. I think it has nothing to do with the violence that occurs. It doesn't have anything to do with obligatory firebombings, which are police doing anything there? I think it's entirely about a use of force to make Jacinta Allen and government look particularly powerful and fearful. That doesn't work. Find people who firebomb and put them in jail. Ban lighters probably would have made more sense. We have an epidemic of firebombings where we need licenses for lighters, which is seems about as absurd, but probably would fix more. Licenses for lighters. It's stupid.
And it is, look, if you ask any Jewish person, the average Jewish person on the street, they would say, well, where the problem lies, the source of the problem for anti-Semitism and hostility towards Jews lie. And they would say that it's the left, the far left, the radical left that controls the academia, the Labour government. They would pinpoint it at the state government and the Albanese Wong government. And when Jacinta Allen visited the site of the arson, people were not asking her, why don't we have extra laws? They were asking her, why didn't you, for months, you've been sitting there and you haven't done anything. Why don't you enforce the existing laws? We don't want additional laws. There are enough mechanisms in place that the government has at its disposal, more than enough actually, to remedy any situation, not just with Jews, but with other minorities. But we live in a two-tiered system, and I believe, in my opinion, the government is using this as an excuse to give themselves more powers, essentially. And it sounds counterintuitive to any, I think, normal person that's observing this. Why would you, for a government that operates a two-tiered system, that abuses its power, that selectively enforces its power, like we saw during the COVID lockdowns in Victoria, where they used the anti-terror police to crack down and pepper spray grandmothers and working people and arrest pregnant women? Why would you give them even more powers? It just doesn't make sense, unless, of course, there's some kind of agenda. And in this case, unfortunately, they are using anti-Semitism as one factor, but they're also obviously have many other things in their disposal, in their arsenal, to give them that excuse where they can potentially give themselves more power.
Because they're not able to stop violent crime on the streets, be it from gangs of youths with machetes to fire bombings, be it Purgatory or the synagogue. They are unable to control it. Either police are unwilling or unable or under-resourced. The culture of police, which of police officers I speak to, 80 to 90% of their time is spent on domestic violence issues. This is a larger issue that they're just going to use to target where they're copping points in the media for their pre-selections, which means that they go after speech, because that's what leads polling, which leads their analysts. As to anti-Semitism, yeah, there's a lot of fear within that community. I understand that. But I don't see, and I believe these laws will actually make that sentiment even worse. I believe these laws will raise more questions as to groups you can criticize, which was Jews, Chinese, the list that she went through, and women, and the groups which are not listed will look at that list and say, why not me? Why am I excluded from that? Why are we unable to criticize the groups which are in these protected classes, but my views are verboten? No, this doesn't add up, and it will make the entire dialogue even worse and will worsen anti-Semitism, which I understand certain groups are concerned about. So great own goal there. Good work.
Well, like I said, I mean, the main source of the problem, the main source of the incitement for anti-Semitism against Jewish people, and the Victorian police has for months refused to enforce the law. to protect Jewish people is the Labor government. That is the opinion of the majority of Jewish people on the ground in where I am, that I'm speaking to, that I interact with. They would pinpoint it at the Labor government. So for her to sit there and say that she's coming up with the solutions is kind of like the fox guarding the hen house. That's what it is. And they've created a system where essentially people are getting radicalized. So with their far left politics that they've been basically presiding over in Victoria. I mean, the Labor government here has been in power for over a decade, and they've in Victoria, it's no secret, we've got the most radical government with the most radical left-wing policies in the entire country and possibly the world. And that essentially not only has it radicalized young people into the left, but it's also marginalized people who don't agree with the left and made them more radical and made them go the other way. So essentially the center has diminished. So essentially more and more people are either going to the far left or to the far right. What are your thoughts around that?
We live in the melting pot. Failed. I'm not sure if it was meant to work. It was a furphy, like equality, feminism, all the other catchphrases of multiculturalism. Whatever it was sold as, it didn't work out as, and that's failed. We in Australia live in a tossed salad where each have their own certain different groups, and it's been this way for thousands of years. I think there was just a view that came out of the 1960s that we could make this work. Rather, it was driven by LSD or whatever they were smoking back then, that it just didn't work out, and the universities were not there. No, it was never achieved. And if it was for about 10 or 20 years. So we live in a tossed salad where each group keeps their own, and that's the modern 2020s version of multiculturalism. My people, your people, their people, we all have a people in a lobby group. And you had some protesters there on the steps of your parliament who said you spoke for white people there, who faced a lot of media attention around that. That's a hard line, probably the hardest line view of that, who also led to Jacinda Ardern's speech of where these new laws would come from, but they weren't able to charge him. Is this just coming out of the Labor government? I think you'll find both parties want to crack down on those groups. Do they have a right to speak? I think they do. I took a transcript of Joel Davis' speech and looked through the hate speech laws and went, I don't see anything illegal here. And if he is then charged, then what is he being charged for? And then some of the speeches that are at these protests from the, shall we say, Hezbollah supporters. And I go, I'm not seeing anything illegal. Again, where this is coming from is inside these buildings who are supporters of the Labor Party, who tend to be paid supporters, who are saber rattling to fork off and create their own political parties. And maybe they should, more power to them, democracy. We haven't reached multiculturalism. We're not going to. What's the solution to this? Each of these different fragmented groups are going to advocate for themselves. That's just the reality we live in. There is no solution, but everyone sort of tries to support each other's groups and create each other's bonds, as we have here between different groups and people. We have a common bonds on views, values, and others.
Sure. And someone asked in the comment section, why are Jews so special? So you're welcome to disagree with my insight here, but Euphemie, I hope you pronounce your name right, the people that are the government that's passing these laws, they don't care about Jews. They're not doing this to protect Jews. They're just using this as an excuse. They have nothing but hatred, and they're antagonistic towards Jewish people. They've never missed an opportunity to show that throughout their decade plus in power. And we saw that especially during the lockdowns, where they singled out the Jews for special treatment. And we see that with the Albanese Labor government, but you're more than welcome to disagree with me. As for Joel Davis, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't believe that he should be prosecuted. I mean, he's an open Nazi. He was on the steps of the parliament. He was wearing backpacks and on the backpacks that they were all wearing, including Joel Davis, it said the National Socialist Network. People seem to deny that he's a Nazi, but he's quite open and proud about that. He should be allowed to express his views, because if you, like, I guess kind of like what you said in a way, if you try to clamp down on that, you're only going to radicalize him and others, push them more over the edge. I think people should have a right to express their views with limitations. I don't think openly inciting violence, inciting to kill someone, that's not free speech. Defamation's not free speech. So that's a form of liberty deprivation. You're depriving someone of their own liberties. So that's definitely not free speech. But anything other than that should be allowed, in my opinion. Sorry, Chris, you were going to say something.
Oh, no, I'm just not, that would be paraphrasing what I'm not quite said that. It's more, it would continue to highlight the inequity rather than it would radicalize people I don't think it would draw more people to it, but within the white right and white center, certainly amongst white males, it would continue to raise the already raised eyebrow even further over the back of their head. You go, but why? Again, there are probably some speeches that Tom Sewell has said in the past which might meet the criteria for hate speech laws, but the speech that I heard on the steps of Parliament didn't meet those rules. I guess what the question there is, who's being used as a political football to get where? And the major question I think the white right has is around immigration. I don't think we can talk about this without getting to immigration, because that is so central to Labor Party current success, is vote for us and get more immigration amongst many of these multicultural groups. I know this because I spent time around them, around the hills. That's what the Labor Party, from Andrew Charlton and others, say, is that we're the only party who are going to help support you, more of your people coming here. And that's primarily putting I think we focus so much on the NSN that we're missing, you know what I mean, the vast anti-immigrant, or focus on the larger identitarian side of it. And I think most people who might look at that and say, I'm being left out of Jacinta Allen's list there, who isn't a member of an identitarian group in some way. You may look at this and say, hey, where are people too? Who isn't a member of, say, the British Australian community, which is not the National Socialists, which is not which does not go anywhere near that, which is simply British Australians, European Australians. That's all. We have a, right? And the more that these more centrist groups, like the BAC or others, succeed, I think that will see a lot of the anger of the community actually tone down. So I know it's odd for me that my views have changed over the past 5 years from 2020 to today, where it's not, oh, less identity politics is better. Well, when everyone's playing identity politics, the only losing move is not to play. So whoever's watching this, and you could be from many different groups, be it from India, or your family from Turkey, for example, you have an identity, you have a people. Like that's find a group and spend time with them is what I'll say there, and it will reduce a lot of this extremist, radical, violent uprisings might be there.
I think one of the unfortunate things is, and it's not just in Australia but across the West, is that racism against white people somehow, and discrimination against Christians, so the majority, is somehow seen as acceptable. And I think that, and doesn't pass of racism and bigotry and discrimination. And I think that is one of the reasons why that has led to radicalization, in my opinion, because of that frustration, people getting frustrated, especially young men, and then they're turning to these groups, dubious groups like the National Socialists, etc. What are your thoughts on that?
You within your spectrum, you have the Liberal Party, which says we're going to reduce migrants to only half of Tasmania a year, to Labor, which says what spectrum is there to One Nation's had been in the wars lately with putting forward their lead WA candidate, which seems to support a mass migration, which is a bit of a tumble. Where does this do these people have to go? And that's the challenge. Why you have kind of more militant groups like the NSN is because there's just this vast chasm between the liberal right party and what else is there that's a sensible anti-immigration movement. There isn't. So that's why we spend all of our time on men who salute Adolf Hitler, rather than discussing, can we just have a little less immigration? Could we just have a little less what is hate towards Euro white adult men? And we don't get there. Instead, we go to, oh, well, there's nothing that fits that gap, so therefore you must salute Adolf Hitler. Great. There's nothing on the spectrum. Vast gap, political vacuum.
One of the things that the left does, a lot of, again, people are going to disagree with me, but this is something that you captured yourself, Chriscoveries, is that they like to lump Jews as white people or Anglo-Saxon, meaning that they're not afforded the same protections as other minorities. And people are going to disagree with me because people in the comment section are saying that Jews are treated like they're a special class, they're all powerful. But you actually captured something, and it wasn't a one-off. This has been happening regularly. It wasn't a rare occurrence where a guy in the middle of Sydney was screaming, "Wipe out the Jews, wipe out the effing Jews." The police, and your video went viral, the police not only refused to arrest him, but they also told him off for swearing. They didn't tell him off about the kill Jews part, but they threatened to arrest you because you were, or they appeared.
I was briefly arrested.
Yeah. And that wasn't a one-off. That was actually, in Victoria, the situation's worse. And in London, Jews have been arrested and given move-on orders, while people that were openly screaming, "Kill the Jews," were basically allowed to continue to do what they were doing. And that's an example of a two-tiered policing. But there are people in the comments here, and there's a common misconception that the Jews are all powerful. They've got a powerful lobby group, and that the government always favors them, which, in my opinion, is not true. But you're welcome to disagree.
Is not true. So is true.
So which I believe is a myth, because we've seen many instances where we had two-tiered policing in this country, especially in Victoria, where Jews have not been favored. Quite the opposite, actually.
I think in the halls of government, I think the lobby group has power. I think on the streets it doesn't. I think from ECAJ, Rivkin,
Executive Council of Australian Jewry.
These groups inside Macquarie Street in Sydney, inside Canberra, inside Spring Street, do hold influence over the way these are written, because they've got a lot of great lawyers who are able to provide advice and guidance on how they're phrased. I think on the streets they hold none. I think outside of Jewish suburbs, they don't hold. In the suburbs of Canberra, I'm not sure that they are in Melbourne. In predominantly Islamic suburbs, there's no, it's a problem. So these laws and the number of times we heard the word anti-Semitism post October 7th wouldn't be if they didn't have some level of influence over in that way. But does that trickle down to when I'm standing there on a corner listening to a man say that? Absolutely not. With the officer whose background is what it is, and command is where it is, I think the police recognize the turning tides. In fact, I'll say this, the police saw the mistakes of being caught on the other side of the debate over homosexual rights in the 1970s, and now regularly hold, shall I say, shaming sessions for themselves for being on the wrong side of history in that way. They see the side of history which is going in terms of demographic change towards support for more hardline Islamists. Hardline Islamists which would not be tolerated in Turkey. Views which would end up in jail in Turkey, which would be politically ousted here. Even it is unacceptable. It is so cabal and secular. Isn't that interesting? but putting that to one side, both hold power in different ways. One demographically, one, shall we say, soft paper or political power.
But at the end of the day, the police, especially in Victoria, I don't know what the situation is like in New South Wales. They are not, in theory, they're supposed to be independent from the government, but they're not. And they receive their orders directly from the government. So when they're operating a two-tiered police system, they're not doing it of their own accord. They're getting their orders directly from Spring Street in Victoria.
Yeah. I'd say it's less clear than that. Each officer knows what Jacinta would expect, just as they know what the police minister, Yasmin Catlett, would want in New South Wales. They know what they would expect, and they know what they need to get headlines. The commissioners do. That's precisely why the press release went out triumphing that Joel Davis had been arrested, even though they couldn't work out what to charge him with. And around Purgatory as well. I note with the synagogue, no arrests have been made. No triumph has happened there, which is an interesting one. Do they get the orders from Spring Street? Yes,
with the Purgatory arson, it also took them a while to find the culprits. They didn't find the culprits in the first couple of weeks. And one of the interesting things, one of the reasons why it was delayed was because Hashtaya didn't basically give the police a statement. He didn't go to the police station, and that delayed the case. And a few days before the store burnt down, he made an interesting observation in a podcast. He was amongst friends, he was comfortable, and he asked, why do Arabs in Australia burn each other's shops down? Why? Why don't we help each other? Why don't we uplift each other and support each other? So I thought that was an interesting statement to make. But no, they didn't catch the culprits straight away. It took them many months to catch them, and it appeared that these culprits appeared to be from a Middle Eastern background that they arrested and captured.
With the synagogue, I think everyone's still. I'm not sure if that has been released, but a couple of weeks ago, footage of what happened outside, surveillance. Everyone's clamoring for that. With Purgatory, we live in kind of video age, so everyone's quite excited and waiting for footage of that to be released. But I guess we'll see if that comes out. But what you're facing is that you mentioned that you don't believe these lobbyist group exist. The perception of them is there, and it's not a new.
No, I didn't say that. But I'm just saying you were talking about the Jewish lobby groups.
Yes.
No, I didn't say that they don't exist. They do exist. What I'm trying to convey is I think their power is exaggerated. I don't think. Yes, they do hold some power, but I think people have a tendency to exaggerate their power, and I think the government more often than not, especially the radical left, certainly doesn't hold the Jews in a favorable light. And I think on the contrary, a lot of times the law is not applied fairly when it comes to Jewish people. And what you encountered, what you filmed in Sydney wasn't a one-off. That wasn't a rare event. That's quite common, and it happens commonly in Melbourne.
It's how that gets enforced. Absolutely, I see the double standards. That's why it shocked me for being able to film that and get arrested for it. The only way to kind of get this to align was the principle of anarcho-tyranny, where governments no longer feel that they can enforce widely these kind of rules. So anything that shakes the support systems for them is a risk. Where me filming what happened and broadcasting it widely was more of a risk than a man shouting those words. And maybe they're right. Maybe we've got to rethink this in an age where we've got a new Gutenberg press, which is the internet, able to widely disseminate this kind of call to violence. That's the real danger, more than anything else, is amplifying it. Maybe they're right. I always do say that the lens is one of the most powerful weapons of the modern age. However, their role as police is widely seen by most people, including myself, and legislatively, not to be public relations agents for what is going to shake the stability of Spring Street, Macquarie Street, but instead enforce laws, which are quite clear. And the reality is, I think the police know that's changing. That's not their job anymore. It's to not be caught not policing it and get back to policing what has been well-funded domestic violence and other well-funded issues like that, and hate speech. So maybe we're the fools for thinking that this is 50 years out of date, that you've got laws and you've got to enforce this, equal opportunity and things like that. Well, it seems every year we're singling out new identitarian groups which are on the protected list and groups which are whatever. We should be paying attention to that. We should be listening to that. We're not listening to that. We're going, oh, we're all treating it equally. They don't mean that. They don't mean equality. What they mean is equality for these groups, but not these. So get used to that. And if you don't like that, well, what are you going to do about it? But join your own identitarian group and lobby for your own people's interests.
And the Victorian, you might not be across this. I mean, we spoke about this offline. There's going to be a leadership spill tomorrow in the Victorian State Liberal Party. How is this relevant to what we're speaking about? We're speaking about our people feeling marginalised, becoming more radical, the centre's shrinking. I think tomorrow, the ramifications for tomorrow, because I believe Brad Batten, he's obviously from the right-wing faction of the Liberal Party, and people can correct me in the comment section. You can correct me, Chris. I believe if he wins tomorrow, this is the first time in a while, in decades, that someone from the right-wing faction of the Liberal Party in the state Victorian Liberal Party, that is, I'm talking about federal Liberal, is going to become the head of the party. So I think tomorrow, the ramifications are quite big, because we haven't had a real opposition in Victoria or even federally. And I believe that, we've had this radical left-wing government, the establishment that has been ruling and that has been passing, radical laws and policies, and that has marginalized the communities. If we have a centre-right Liberal government rather than a Labor-light version, perhaps, that could change things. Perhaps that could bring back centre politics. What are your thoughts on that?
I think his background as a cop will appeal to Victorians that are facing a rapid change in their safety. I think his fiscal policies will appeal more than culture war issues. To the culture war, which we are both quite eyes on, I don't know if the numbers are there in Victoria for him. I think the left will be able to tar him as some kind of more redeeming, transgender hating, gay hating. I think they'll be able to do it. I think the numbers, just demographically, where Victoria is going, I think you guys down there are very left-leaning compared to the rest of the country, and getting more left-leaning in money, in numbers. And while you and I will look at Brad and say, oh, great, something a little bit more centre-right, I just think on these cultural issues, they're going to be able to tar him. Now, if these cultural, like more redeeming, has been a huge net loss for the Liberals. Okay, maybe you sat there in Spring Street with the Liberals and said, look, let's get rid of this more redeeming thing. We don't want to look anti-trans. Just kick her out and let's move on with it. Well, that didn't work. It doesn't work. You've got to have something more than just calling her a Nazi. You lost the case, right? That was, again, this is political operation. This isn't about moral, whether she's right or wrong. That rarely has anything to do with anything in politics about right or wrong, okay? Inside political parties, it's about popularity. He has absolutely demolished so much of the donor base of the Liberals, which is so key for getting boots on the ground, for getting anything. The morale inside the party is absolutely trashed. You can't rely on Liberal pride to spend 12 hours a day on booth come election day. They just don't do it. How do you get those Conservatives which trend towards those who do that work and get them there? Do I think Brad Batten can win the leadership? Absolutely. Is Pseudo toast? Absolutely. Can he win an election? They've got to have something that they can really nail just into the wall, and I'm just not seeing that yet. But we're a long way from the election, about a year or so.
2 years. Yeah, exactly. I think, look, the situation on the ground, I could be wrong. Again, people might have a different view, but I think people in Victoria, by and large, have had enough of the far left radical politics that Dan Andrews started to push, and now Jacinta Allen is continuing on with those policies. So I think there's pushback. So I think Brad Batten, I think the pendulum has basically swung in the opposite direction, and I think there's going to be a lot of support for Brad Batten out there. But wait and see. We'll see how things go. Bishop Marmari, Emmanuel, so you covered that shocking attack, attempted murder against the bishop. You weren't actually there, but you came maybe within 20 minutes of it happening. You were right on the scene. We haven't heard from the bishop in a while.
He still does his sermons, but I cannot impart enough how losing his eye affected him. He's a proud, brave man, but each time I see him since, it hurt him. It hurt him right down to his soul. And he will continue speaking, and he still has the energy, and he's still there, and he's a wonderful, lovely man. And each time I go there, my daughter Elizabeth gives him a kiss, and lifts his heart so much. That lifts his heart so much. I think it was his second week back, or second week back, that I lifted Elizabeth up to him and gave him a kiss, and he's like, oh, and I will continue to do that and support him. But it's got to change you, man. Losing an eye. He was meant to have. I don't know if this has already been leaked or not, but I was part of the team helping to make this happen. He was meant to have an interview with Tucker Carlson while Tucker Carlson was in Sydney. Had a date set, had a venue, but the bishop just wasn't up to it. He fell into sadness, as rightly you should. You've lost an eye, you've got to recover, but he just his health was poor. When you lose an eye, there's a lot that happens kind of I was reading about it, but it's tough. He's regaining his strength, his health is so much better, his energy is so much better. It's been quite a while now, but just during that period, it was I think he would deserve everyone's thoughts and prayers.
Absolutely. God send him a recovery. Very inspirational man. It first came to my attention, a lot of people's attention during COVID. Very outspoken, very God-fearing, and yes, we should all pray for his recovery. And I hope, to see his continued success, I hope to see him more in the public eye as well, in the public sphere.
He's still there every week. So if you're in Sydney, head down.
Absolutely.
You don't have to be baptized. You don't have to be Christian. You're like a supporter. If you've got kids, there's room for kids. It's a lovely, welcoming community, more than most any church that I've found around Sydney, with a great message. His message is not one of do whatever you like all the time and who cares, which is so many churches are. It's just like, here, there, whatever. We don't care.
Wishy-washy.
It's just, what are you there? Oh yeah, God loves you. Okay, what else? God loves you. Can you give us a bit more guidance here? Like, no, not really. Thanks.
Now, 20th of January, the Trump inauguration, not far away. Does that give us hope for the future? Trump coming into power. What are your thoughts? Coming back into power.
Yep.
I was
hoping to get there. I won't end up getting there for the inauguration, sadly, but I will be there for CPAC the month after.
Oh, well.
Does it give us hope? Hope with the schedules, things work out. But also it's very cold, and DC is insanely expensive, like ridiculously expensive. I think Sydney is. My last trip that I went there, it was. Yeah, I don't like throwing a lot of shade on different places, but I hate DC. Like, there aren't many places in the world that I hate, and I've traveled widely. I hate DC so deeply.
I hear it's the murder capital of the United States. Is that it? Had the title at one point. Does it still have that title? Maybe Chicago has taken over.
Baltimore's been
Baltimore.
talking, but it was at one point. But it's not just murders tend to be concentrated in certain areas of DC. So there's plenty of nice areas there, but it's a soulless, awful place. And I've been visiting America for 10, 15 years, and it's the worst.
That bad, huh?
I've spent time.
Well, I guess any place that's full of politicians is going to be soulless. It's just inevitable.
I don't mind Canberra. There's a nicer parts of Canberra. DC, everywhere I go, it's I think it's the sheer amount of money. I think it's the sheer amount of money that gets dumped on that place. But sorry, to your question, Trump inauguration, yes, should give you hope. Don't get your hopes up too far. Anyone hoping for mass deportations, yeah, just yeah, not happening. Anyone hoping for term limits, which are being promised, yeah, not happening. A lot of things get said and don't always get there. After all, Matt Gaetz tried to run to the touchdown, never got it. The swamp's still there; it didn't go away. Just because you got your man to the top, it still takes the work from here. I've been chatting with some Americans there who are recognizing this battle doesn't end just because you got your man to the top of the hill. They're going to reform, and they have reformed, and they're working in the shadows as they always have this time. So does it give you hope? Yes. Are you going to get everything that you want and was spoken about? No. Are you still going to have to work for it? Yes.
A lot of people are hopeful that Bobby Kennedy, cafe locked out, a lot of people are against for civil liberties, against medical tyranny. They're hoping that Bobby Kennedy will do what he set out. What are your thoughts? Do you think that Big Pharma will somehow be brought to account, multi-trillion-dollar behemoth will ever be brought to account for what they've done in the last few years, if not the last few decades?
If I were in the Democratic Party, I would have graphics ready to go. I'd be preparing video edits. I'd be preparing scripts for all of my operatives for when a measles outbreak hits. It doesn't matter how big it is. Just have it ready to go to target RFK, going through all of his old speeches, cutting up beautiful cuts and edits of every time that he's ever downplayed the impact of vaccines. Then have scripts which I give to my video guys to get on scene with victims of measles. They're not going to die, right? Because measles, by and large, for a long time hasn't been a particularly deadly disease, but some will. And as a Democratic Party operative, I am going to pin Bobby Kennedy's name to that child's death. And we'll get rid of him as health secretary. This is what I believe will happen within his first 12 months. And it will move him aside. He will get some of these cases on the road. He will start to bring pharma to account. He will save, plausibly in my view, thousands of life years of people's obesity, of poisons in our food, and many others. Doesn't matter. Contagious disease, as we saw through COVID, there's nothing that gets a headline like a contagious disease. And kids, I mean, it's just the perfect cross-section, and it'll just be pushed aside. His position will become untenable.
I think you're giving them ideas, Chriscoveries. I think we might have a few already listening in, and they're taking notes.
No, they already have this. They will already have this.
Yeah,
they already have this in play. They're not listening to some guy. They're not listening to me for advice. And I don't think I could ever work for the Democrats. I actually had someone. I did some video work for the Libertarians in their by-election.
Oh, well.
Help them out with. They just need some video work. I was happy to help them. But when they first messaged me, they said, "Hey, can you help out the Libs?" And I was like, "Bro, I don't think I like the Liberals." I'm like, "Bro, I don't think I can. It'd be terrible for my reputation, let alone any other. I just don't think I can." And they were like, "Oh, they're Libertarians." I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure, no worries." That's just I'm just want to give that joke about it, where I am on the political spectrum. I don't think I could shoot video for the Libs.
And Chriscoveries, in closing, wrapping up our podcast for tonight, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience? I want to give you the floor.
Multiculturalism, as you knew it, didn't work out. That's okay. That doesn't mean you need to go and start pledging allegiance to certain radical kind of ideas. But you've got to find who your people are. Each different group has their own different group. You have India clubs. You have Polish clubs. Your club isn't just a color. Find people like who share your views and values, who share your background, who share your hopes and dreams. That might be a church. That might be a club of some kind. The reason why people are feeling so disenfranchised and why these hate speech laws are targeting them, because they kind of are, is because no one represents your group. I think all of our politics will become a lot better, be it for Jews, Muslims, if this vast unlabeled whiteness finds its group, finds its name, finds a people and a brand, and says, "Yep, this is who we are, and this is who represents us." We are not just invisibly represented through inheritance. Oh, we because we were here first, and we named Australia, and we built it. Well, that's great, but you personally didn't. Your people didn't, who inherited it. You have no name. You have no group. You expect your government to represent you. No, your government represents lobby groups, all kinds of different lobby groups. And the reason why you might be upset with certain lobby groups is because the lobby groups are doing really, really well at representing their people, and you don't have one. So what are you going to do about it? You're going to whine, complain? You're going to go and call for violence? That doesn't tend to work. So the game is multiculturalism. This is how the board's laid out. Either play it, because flipping the table over, well, yeah, everyone else on the table is just going to mad with you.
Now, Chriscoveries, if you haven't followed him, guys, please take a moment. Links are in the description below. Chriscoveries on X and Facebook. Is there anywhere else where people can find you and follow you?
Facebook have been pretty much censored on. The queer man who called me a cis hetero, I won't say the rest of the words, who that was removed off Facebook for being misleading. I don't really paste much there anymore, even though I do have 31,000 followers there. I have to be very careful. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, but yeah, no, Twitter. I love Twitter. I love X. It's the place to be, and you do to KOFY, and yeah. Thanks, Timon. Thanks for having us on.
Excellent. Thank you, Chriscoveries. Will you be coming back on? We would love to have you back on the podcast again sometime in the future.
I'd love to have you on. I'm going to have you on and ask you plenty of questions. So
I'll hold you to it. Excellent. Terrific. Well, thank you for watching, everyone, and God bless.
Thanks,